Facebook's actions were unnecessary. They were heavy-handed and they will damage its reputation here in Australia.
Tonight, Unfriended, Facebook takes the drastic step of banning all Australian news content on its platform, including us, with emergency services and community groups caught in the crossfire. We'll speak to an investigative journalist about who's to blame as concerns grow about what Mark Zuckerberg's next move could be. It's Sunday, the 21st of February. You're watching 6 News. Also tonight,
the Eagle has landed.
Australia's vaccine rollout set to begin tomorrow after the first batch of Pfizer's doses land in Sydney. But a new ad has hit out at the PM for lying. We'll tell you when you can expect to get the jab. And later, Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi hit with fresh charges. But what caused the political instability in the developing nation? Tonight we'll investigate the origins of the coup and the power struggle which led to the hostile takeover.
It could take a bloodbath. And we've seen this happen in the past. This is not an idle threat by the military. They have shown that they are capable of massacring people, large numbers of people.
Good evening. Australian journalism has been dealt a massive blow with Facebook banning all Australians from sharing and viewing news on its platform. The monumental decision means Australian news publishers like us will no longer be able to share stories on Facebook. News from international outlets won't be visible to millions of Aussies either. Senior reporter Darby Travers begins our coverage.
Facebook has taken the drastic move to ban all Australian news content from its platform in response to the new proposed media bargaining law that would force big tech to pay for news content. This means that Aussie publishers cannot post or share any content on their pages, and users cannot see any Australian or international news. Some Facebook pages belonging to Australian government organisations, including emergency services and weather forecasters, have started to reappear on Facebook after earlier being blocked, which included Fire and Rescue New South Wales and Queensland Health, but many are still banned. Here at 6 News, our page has not been removed, but we cannot post any new content despite many of our own viewers revealing they can share our YouTube videos. There are now mounting calls to boycott Facebook following the shock ruling, with many saying they only had accounts to see news headlines. Meanwhile, a month after threatening to shut down its search engines in Australia, Google now looks as though it's here to stay, striking millions of dollars worth of deals with some of the nation's biggest news providers. 7 West Media, 9 The Guardian and ABC have all reached deals with Google, totaling more than $100 million. News Corp is yet to come to the table, but is understood to be negotiating a global deal with big tech companies for publication in Australia, the UK, and the US. And if you're a Facebook user looking for the latest news, head to our Twitter and Instagram page, as well as YouTube for the very latest.
And for more on this story, I'm joined by investigative journalist and author of the recently released book, Rorts and Ripoffs, Tom Ravlic. Tom, thanks for joining us tonight. How concerned should we be by Facebook's power to make massive decisions like this overnight?
Leo, one of the most critical things that people need to think about is what Facebook does. So if you look carefully at how Facebook has operated, people have used it for news, people have used it to exchange ideas, artists have used it to provide sort of performances. Even during the pandemic, people have been performing on Facebook and entertaining their friends and keeping their skill set up. Coming to today's developments, sort of the recent developments in Facebook's actions, it's critical for people to realise that the minute you remove news sources from the Facebook feed, that subjects the audience to the kinds of conspiracy theories and misinformation that has existed for a period of time about COVID and other things, including the so-called stealing of the election in the US. So if people are operating on Facebook alone, Leo, some people will find that their feeds no longer contain information that actually counters the conspiracy theories and the things their friends might be getting from YouTube videos or from encrypted app conversations, like things they might see on Telegram or share in WhatsApp groups. So it is a real concern in terms of getting the truth out to people and getting it to people in a way that is verified. Most journalism is actually verified to some degree.
Now, you touched on it there. Do you actually believe we could see a rise in misinformation on the site, especially given we've got the vaccine rollout beginning tomorrow?
It's likely that people will see more of it, but it may just be that once you remove a formal news source, that all that is left is some of the conspiracy theories, misinformation, conspiracy theory, fan fiction, if you like. We saw a lot of that during the period between the US election, November 3rd, and even until recently, when people were arguing that the election was stolen. And there were people who would not be convinced that the election was actually legitimately won by Joe Biden, no matter how often you said that. And the reason that's the case isn't just because they're diehard Republicans, it's because they've been bathing in the kind of thing that is misinformation, sort of stories, conspiracy theories, and that's all they've listened to. If that's all you listen to and you don't have an alternative source of legitimate news, you get yourself into trouble. So yes, we could see a spike, but we could also just see the conspiracy theories that are there not being challenged by formal news outlets in the Facebook ecosystem, if I can put it that way.
And just quickly before we go, I've got to ask, do we actually have anyone to blame for this? The government, Rupert Murdoch, Facebook? Who should we point the finger at, so to speak?
I think we've got tensions. I think we need to be careful when we analyse this. You can't blame it on one side or the other. There are tensions on all sides in public policy discussions. On the one hand, you've had the government fueled by the local media outlets expressing concern that they've got revenue leakage going through social media. On the other hand, you've got social media giants who are looking at Australia and looking at it in such a way that Australia becomes a litmus test. If they fail to get their victory, if you like, down here in Oz, they might actually find that other jurisdictions start to turn the thumbscrews and want similar deals. So you've got a rather heavy game being played on both sides. So we need to be cognizant that none of this is clear cut. It's like watching a couple of rams banging at each other in some farmer's paddock. That's what we're seeing.
All right, certainly interesting to see what Mark Zuckerberg's next move could be. Tom Ravlic, thanks for joining us tonight.
Leo, thank you for having me.
All right, well, meanwhile, we want to hear what you're saying about the Facebook news ban. Here's some of what's coming into our Twitter page tonight. I Live in the Hawkesbury says that he thinks it's a prime example of what happens when governments rely on private corporations instead of providing adequate services themselves. Meanwhile, Susie says that she missed the Victorian Premier's update that she usually watches via Facebook. Quote, "What is the federal government doing? Why are they demanding money from Facebook? Please explain," Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg. Puff the Dragon says that asking third parties to pay first parties for what second parties share is utterly, well, I can't say that on air, can I? Effing insane. Some strong worded feedback there. And meanwhile, Kev D tells us that if Facebook wants to start restricting users, he'll be happy to show himself the door. So that's some of the feedback coming into our Twitter account tonight. Remember, you can tweet us anytime by simply using hashtag 6NewsAU. Meanwhile, a new ad has hit out at the PM for lying about the vaccine and has called Victoria snap a 5-day lockdown Morrison's lockdown. Take a look.
There are growing fears this morning that Victoria is on the brink of a third lockdown.
Victoria will be plunged back into a snap 5-day lockdown.
Australia can be in the leading pack of getting vaccines.
Australia right up the front.
And make sure you let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Well, a rape scandal rocked Parliament House this week, and tonight the fallout is deepening. A former government staffer alleges that she was raped by a senior male colleague on a couch in the Defence Minister's office 2 years ago. Brittany Higgins has blasted the government's handling of her case, accusing the Prime Minister of victim blaming. Tonight we'll bring you the full story, and we do warn you that some viewers may find details in Connor, our 4K's report, distressing.
This is Parliament House in all its grandeur, a symbol of national identity home to the people whose decisions shape our nation. But it's here, in what's meant to be the safest building in Australia, at the heart of our country's democracy, that this woman's freedom was allegedly violated.
He was sweaty. I couldn't get him off of me. At this point I started crying.
Brittany Higgins was 24 years old and just weeks into her dream job as a media advisor to Defence Minister Linda Reynolds, when, after a night out with friends and colleagues in 2019, she was invited to Parliament House by a senior male staffer who was considered a rising star in the political party.
He just had to pick something up, some vague, nondescript something.
The pair was granted after-hours access by security. Higgins was drunk, passing out on the couch in Linda Reynolds' office, before being awoken by a sharp pain in the leg.
Sorry, was there sexual intercourse going on?
Yeah, I woke up mid-rape, essentially.
Higgins decided not to pursue a police complaint, fearing it would impact her employment.
It felt like immediately became sort of like a political problem. It felt like that immediately. It wasn't a staffing problem, it wasn't a HR problem, it wasn't a human problem, but it immediately was like, okay, we have an issue.
Minister Reynolds' office was reportedly steam cleaned in the hours after the alleged rape, but senior staff in Reynolds' office were only made aware of an incident 3 days later. The Defence Minister then met with Higgins in the room she was allegedly raped in.
Saying sorry is often the hardest thing for those of us who work in this place to say. But can I say today, sorry is the easiest word for me to say. And I unreservedly apologise to Brittany Higgins.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison was kept in the dark for 2 years, only learning about the alleged sexual assault on Monday. And in some developing news, another woman, a former Liberal staffer who wishes to remain anonymous, has come forward at the weekend alleging she was raped by the same former Morrison government advisor. She told The Australian she wants to shine a light on this awful culture. Scott Morrison admitting there is a problem with the workplace culture at Parliament, as questions about what he knew and when continue to swirl. Higgins says she is distressed by Scott Morrison's use of victim-blaming rhetoric.
I'm very sorry she feels that way, Mr. Speaker. I know she must be under tremendous stress.
Scott Morrison has since ordered 2 reviews to address workplace culture at Parliament. In a statement, Higgins herself said she also wants to drive significant reform in how Parliament House handles issues of this nature. On Friday, Brittany Higgins asked federal police to reopen the investigation. The senior male staff member who was forced to resign over the security breach and not the alleged rape is now working in Sydney. And if you or anyone you know is impacted by sexual assault, family or domestic violence, call 1-800-RESPECT. Connor Alforque, 6 News.
Well, changing pace now with rumours of a federal election floating around online. Some voters say they've been left unimpressed by the status quo and are looking for something different. That's where the New Liberals come in. They've claimed that they will heal the political crisis by changing the very political culture itself and creating a wave of change which will sweep across the nation and wash away the professional politicians. I sat down with their founder, Victor Klein, earlier this week. Here's some of what he had to say. You have described your party as socially progressive. How do you actually define that?
That's a really good question. I suppose it means that I suppose it's put as a juxtaposition to the current government, which is socially regressive. So all the things like gay marriage, equality of opportunity, those sort of things that full employment, all those things that the government doesn't seem to care about. They're the things that matter to us. It's a vague term, but it's the sort of four-word slogan that you have to give people a general idea of what you're talking about.
Overseas now, and South Korean intelligence agencies say hackers in the north tried to steal COVID-19 vaccination technology from Pfizer, but it's unclear whether their attempts were successful. And it wouldn't be the first time the US pharmaceutical giant has been targeted. Microsoft claimed in November last year that state-backed organisations in North Korea and Russia targeted at least 9 organisations, including Pfizer. Kim Jong-un insists that the country has never reported a single case of coronavirus, despite having active exchanges with China before it closed its borders in January last year. In the coming weeks, 2 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine are set to arrive in the secretive state. The revelations come after Kim Jong-un's wife made her first public appearance in more than a year. You can see her there, shown at an event marking the birthday of her husband's late father. US Senator Ted Cruz has admitted it was a mistake for him to go on holidays while Texas faced a deadly winter storm. Photos show Cruz boarding a plane to Mexico, where he said he had planned to stay through the weekend but had second thoughts, quote, almost the moment he sat down on the plane.
Whether the decision to go was tone deaf, look, it was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it. I was trying to be a dad, and all of us have made decisions. When you've got 2 girls who've been cold for two days and haven't had heater power, and they're saying, hey, look, we don't have school, why don't we go, let's get out of here.
And you can actually hear protesters outside of his home in the background of that clip there. They are now calling on the US Senator to immediately resign. Well, the military takeover in Myanmar has gained worldwide attention, with dozens of leaders calling for the immediate release of Aung San Suu Kyi. But what actually caused the political instability in the developing nation? Tonight, our reporter Lincoln Holmes investigates the origins of the coup and the power struggle which led to the hostile takeover.
They say perspective is everything. Just like this daytime dancer, she and the world were blindsided by the coup in Myanmar. Myanmar, also known as Burma, is a country in Southeast Asia with more than 50 million people who are tonight without a leader of their choosing. Aung San Suu Kyi was arrested and detained. February 1, 2021, tanks rolled into the capital to overwhelm the democratically elected government and seize control of the nation. Troops now patrol the streets as people risk their lives and their limbs to protest. A nighttime curfew is now in place with a 1-year state of emergency declared. But to get the perspective on the present, we need to look at the past. Myanmar is marred by a history of brutal military takeovers. According to the UN in 2007, scores were killed when a division of the military trapped protesters and began shooting the crowd.
They're really clamping down hard now. All the people trying to disperse. But I saw some very tough beatings going on.
That same division was spotted near protesters just days ago, raising serious questions about the rise of military operations once again. In 2015, a democratically elected civilian government led by Nobel Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi was allowed to take over the country, signalling a new path for the country, a future of freedom. But with the military now in charge for the next year, standing up for that freedom might be a high price to pay.
It could take a bloodbath. And we've seen this happen in the past. This is not an idle threat by the military. They have shown that they are capable of massacring people, large numbers of people.
The conditions for a rebellion are less than ideal. The internet dropping in and out and electricity cut for hours at a time, leaving citizens to wait without power while their democracy sits in darkness. Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
We're returning now to the Facebook news ban, and while I don't normally do this, I really just want to take the time to discuss the impact this has had on us. Now, Darby touched on it a little earlier, but Facebook was 1/3 of our audience, which is quite a lot of viewers unable to see our posts. So we are really asking you to please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and most importantly of all, do subscribe to us on YouTube with full notifications so you don't miss any of our 24/7 news coverage. I spoke to a One News reporter in New Zealand about this. Take a look at some of what was said.
From the big media players to the smaller fry.
Welcome to this special edition of 6 News on this Thursday.
Australians can no longer access their news on Facebook.
Quite shocking. A lot of people really shocked about this announcement.
The social media heavyweight hitting the nuclear button overnight, scrapping all Australian news outlets from its platform without warning.
We are digital only, so that is our only way to provide news. It's tough. It is really tough, and quite honestly, it's devastating because Facebook audience was about 1/3 of our viewers.
Just goes to show we should all worry, and we have an organisation with massive power. And when they exercise that power, the implications for us can be extraordinary.
Well, on the upside, I think we can now officially claim to be seen internationally. By the way, WAMN News, they are another independent news outlet. Head to their social media pages at WAMN News and their YouTube channel for the latest. Now, I don't normally give shout-outs to other news outlets, but they have been such a great help with us, whether that's bushfire coverage, COVID-19, Mark McGowan's press conferences, or their state election, which is coming up very shortly. Their Sunday evening news is also coming up later tonight, so do make sure you tune into that also via their YouTube channel, links in the description. Checking tomorrow's forecast though right now across the country, Brisbane sunny, a top of 34, Sydney partly cloudy, 26, 29 degrees in the nation's capital, 20 in Melbourne, Hobart 19, Adelaide 22, Perth starting the day at another reasonably warm low, 23, getting up to 36, sunny there as well. And in Darwin, as you'd expect, we have most Monday mornings, heavy storms and a top of 30 degrees. Before we go tonight, just another very quick tease. We have a massive story coming up on Wednesday, and I don't usually say that lightly with a guest you won't see anywhere else. I really mean that. This person is not speaking to mainstream media. They are only speaking to us, so stay tuned for a promo coming out tomorrow. That is 6 News, though. For this very busy Sunday evening, you can stay up to date with the latest news by following us on social media, not Facebook. Ignore the graphic down there, not Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, though. Just search 6 News A to find us. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.